Is it all because in the beginning God separated the land from the sea and the night from the day? The book of Genesis was never meant to be a scientific text. It's an ancient people's inspiration and understanding of a divine being creating life, the life we've been given, and the proper relationship we are to have with that creation. Yet in this text, we do get a glimpse of science. There was a dark nothingness, and then bang! There was light. The Big Bang Theory, it's right there in the 3rd verse of the Bible. And as the creation story moves along, we see, in story fashion, pretty closely the proper order of what has been created. Without our modern scientific instruments, but with scientific curiosity, thousands of years ago, people figured out, first there was nothing, then light, then planetary formation, then the creation of sea and dry land, and then plants, and then animals, and finally, humans. The how of creation is not as important to the biblical writers as the why. And the why is where our English lets us down. The why is the ancient storytelling tradition, and the use of our imagination is why it's still important. In verse 2 it says, "Wind from God swept over the face of the waters." Another way it's typically translated is the Spirit moved across the face of the deep. The word translated swept or moved can also be translated as fluttered or shimmied. Now, swept and moved are both functional words to tell the intention of God, but how much more evocative are the words fluttered and shimmied? And what does your heart feel when you feel love? It flutters, right? I mean, even if you're not a romantic, there's still something there that happens. Blame it on electricity, I guess. It's difficult to explain such an emotion that just seems too perfect for this world. We describe the delicate movements of a butterfly wings as fluttering on a breeze. That is the heart in love. And what comes to mind when you hear the word shimmy? Okay, if you're from Mahoning County, it's what your car does after a month on our roads. All right, so that's a different shimmy. But shimmy is a dancing term. I mean, can we imagine God dancing, especially in such a provocative way? I mean, we don't let ourselves imagine that, do we? I mean, maybe there's a bit of a ew factor there, but that's our hang-up. I mean, who says God can't dance like Elvis? Or Justin Timberlake? Or Beyonce? Okay, too over the top. How about Fred and Ginger? Or more recently, I guess, Ryan and Emma. Okay, so pick your generation. All right. God danced. How cool is that? God created everything in a moment of uncontrollable exuberance. God's heart fluttered and the dance of creation began. God creates because God comes from a place of wanting happiness. When are you at your most creative? Is it only when you are happy? I mean, might it also be when you are looking for happiness? Everyone can probably think of artists in various genres, writers, musicians, filmmakers, painters, that create things in dark periods of their lives because they've just got to get it out. They can't hold the sadness inside, so they express it in the way they know how. Toddlers famously express their dissatisfaction with their temper tantrums. I mean, they want someone to make them happy and make them happy now. And as we age, we find other ways to express our unhappiness, and you know the many ways that we do that. The opioid epidemic is an expression of severe unhappiness. Every addictive behavior, really. Unkind words reveal our moments of unhappiness. The circumstances of life that are truly sad intrude upon our desire for happiness. And the list goes on. Sadness and happiness. Darkness and light. Twins of creation. They are related from the very beginning. In 1922, James Weldon Johnson wrote his poem, The Creation, with the opening lines, "And God stepped out on space, and he looked around and said, 'I'm lonely. I'll make me a world.'" His poem is a moving rendition of Genesis chapter 1. It's all the more poignant when you consider Mr. Johnson's life experience. He knew all about the separation of light and dark. As a black man in a segregated America. We all believe in segregation of one kind or another. We want our kids to be separated from bad influences. We might want to keep our in-law visits to a minimum. We have segregated ourselves on social media. I mean, social media, don't get me wrong, it does have its good points. It has allowed people separated by geographical distance to reconnect or stay connected. I've enjoyed that very much with friends from my childhood. But how many people do you know that have substituted pixels for personal contact? How many people take some other person's slanted point of view and cast it as truth without a thought if there is anything accurate about it? What happens to us when we take the time of day meant for darkness, meant for rest, and fill it with the wrong kind of light? God created all of us to be in relationship with all of creation, with one another, with this planet, with God. And relationship with one another is best experienced in person. And our relationship with this planet is best experienced by considering our impact on future generations before we go around rearranging this earth's surfaces and waters. Our relationship with God's divine being is not had in a vacuum. You were created to live collaboratively with this earth and the people who share it. Genesis was not the first book of the Bible written, but it was placed there for a pretty important reason. The creation story is how God's relationship with us began. It's a relationship born of love and a desire for happiness and the amazing expression of that love and happiness. How do we express our love and happiness for creation? We have been created to dance in harmony with everyone who shares this planet, regardless of skin color or what they wear on their head. We have been created to live in harmony with each season of this world, no matter how cold or hot it gets. And we should use the noggin that God gave us to believe what science says is happening to our planet. Happiness is relational. Happiness holds hands with sadness. Light gives way to darkness, yet no matter how dark a moment can be, the slightest flicker of light gives us direction and hope. Our mood might be influenced by the phases of the moon, but our happiness is not determined by the alignment of the planets. How we align ourselves with one another ultimately reveals our relationship with God. Amen to a happy relationship.